I did view some public entertainment. I I actually went and saw a movie, which is a rare thing for me. As we've discussed previously, I
Uh-huh.
don't have much respect for the craft of filmmaking in recent years,
Right.
and I pretty much have been restricting myself to going to see, um, geez, mainly kids movies,
All right.
and comedy movies involving Legos. I've even sworn off the superhero movies. Like I enjoyed a few of them, but they're getting so repetitive and samey now.
Mm-hmm.
That it's so anyway. So when I saw the preview for this film, though, I got very excited
Right.
because I was kind of surprised. I didn't expect it to get made, to be totally honest. It's Murder on the Orient Express. You know, and I was really surprised that they made it, and both excited and wary of it because
Mm-hmm.
I remember what they did to Sherlock Holmes
Mm.
and was very disappointed in those movies. And let me say with the Sherlock Holmes movies, before anybody jumps on me, yes, they were very, very well acted. I have no problems with was whoever that was and
Right.
his friend, whoever that was.
Right.
But it it had nothing to do with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes. Nothing at all. It was terrible. Terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm a huge fan of Sherlock Holmes. And that's why I got excited about Murder on the Orient Express. Now, I had never I have not read the book. In
You
fact, I was
haven't.
no, I'm not. I never got into Poirot. I was a Sherlock Holmes fan.
Okay.
And for those who don't know, Hercule Poirot is one of two detectives that were created by the novelist Agatha Christie. One was Hercule Poirot, and the other one was Miss Marple.
Well, her
And
two most famous ones, yes.
yeah, I mean, there were a lot of other ones, and those two ended up being used often, and they ended up in series. I think there were like 30 or 40 books involving Poirot, of which Murder on the Orient Express was like the 10th or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't actually know the solution to the mystery, which actually was
Oh,
kind of nice.
that's good.
Yeah, it surprised me. But
Uh-huh.
I'm going in and I'm half nervous about it because, it's Kenneth Branagh, who is an enjoyable character actor, but he can be very campy. And with a character like Hercule Poirot, who is known for his eccentricities, that can be very dangerous in the hands of a campy character actor. And then on top of it, because it's a modern movie, that there's going to be the temptation to action it up. Like where they made
Mm-hmm.
Sherlock Holmes into a bullet time ninja who could stop time in his brain and predict how to kill someone in a fight and then do that. Which that's neither here nor there. So I
Uh-huh.
even went in expecting some of that. And let me tell you something. Nope.
No?
No.
No.
No. There were two very minor action scenes in the movie. And they were not there was one brief chase where a guy
Mm-hmm.
is running away and they chase him and then they tackle him and it's over. But it's tense because of the story happening around it. So that's what lends the chase scene its tension. And the chase scene isn't particularly exciting. And there is a scene where at one point he ends up held at gunpoint and there is a little bit of a scuffle. But he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't end up doing anything ridiculous to get himself out of the scuffle. And it's over very quickly because, again, the movie's not about action. And I was impressed by the amount of restraint in that.
Hmm.
Because I figured, one of the problems with a movie like this is that it is basically a movie that it's what in TV shows they call it a bottle episode, where the
Right.
entire story takes place in just one setting. So visually it was a pretty movie. The
Cool.
the scenes as it's going through the mountains and the train gets stranded, which is not really a spoiler because it's very very early primary plot point is the train gets stranded.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who don't know, basically it is the story of a private detective who accidentally ends up stranded on a train on which a murder happens. And then he has to figure out which person on the train is the murderer. standard detective
Yes.
plot. Trapped, except instead of a spooky mansion, it's a train, a really gorgeous luxury train stranded in an avalanche in the Alps.
Well, it's the Orient Express, so partially probably.
Yeah, okay.
but yeah, it's not quite a locked room mystery.
No,
but it is. Yeah, it is a bottle episode. That's for sure.
Well, to be fair, there is actually an element of locked room mystery to it, also.
Yeah,
where
but that's not the main twist.
Yeah,
the main tweak.
And I don't want to give away the main tweak because you know what?
No.
I want to give this movie, like, I think I said 4.5 stars.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say that I think that extra half star was me being so surprised that they could actually produce just a good murder mystery movie with, and the thing that's really struck me too was the tone. Because again, Poirot is eccentric. And in the very beginning, where they have to introduce the detective by having him solve a very difficult mystery in the opening scene. That's how you have to do it. We have to see him being good at his job because the rest of the movie is going to be about him struggling to do his job. So we won't believe he's a good detective unless we see him solve a mystery and outsmart someone. And it's played for laughs a little. It's a little humorous, but nothing like ridiculous in the tone for the period or anything like that. And gradually, the humorous tone of Poirot's eccentricities fall away as the seriousness of the crime and the situation and the emotions of the characters come to the fore. So there's like an emotional crossfade that works very well through the movie, and Poirot has a significant character arc.
Imagine that.
At the end of the movie, he's a very different character from when he started because solving this mystery teaches him something and helps him overcome what he realizes was a character flaw he never knew he had. Like, it's not a perfect movie by any stretch, but it is really well done. The cast was very good at it, except I found, Michelle Pfeiffer. I spent the whole movie trying to figure out who this character was. And until you know who, there is a reveal about, there's a lot of characters who actually have they're like concealed identities, and you discover who they are later. And when you find out who she is, Michelle Pfeiffer makes sense as in the role, but I still found her so, like, she wasn't in the period, if that makes sense. Like, everybody else was in the 1930s. Michelle Pfeiffer, I think she was in the 50s, maybe. I don't think she can go back that far. I just don't think that's a talent she has. No offense to Michelle Pfeiffer, I just don't really think that was the role for her. And it was very distracting because I'm trying to figure out who she is the whole time. And the makeup in the movie was really well done too, because you sort of didn't notice who you were looking at. Judi Dench was great in it. I love her. She's fantastic.
I'm looking at the rest of the cast. I'm fairly surprised these people were actually in the film. Willem Dafoe. Yeah,
he was very good.
Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp, that was interesting because I did know enough about because they made a thing that Johnny Depp was going to be in it, and Allie was excited, or sorry, Tiny was excited that Johnny Depp was in it, and I was fairly sure he's the murder victim.
Yeah.
So he's like the guest star on every mystery TV show. Who they get the big name star to play the guy who dies in the cold open.
Oops, you came to Cat Cove.
But for the time that he was on screen, because he's a guy that you wanted to see murdered. Okay. He's a jerk. And he's supposed to be. I mean, that's who the character was. And he did it well. Like, you really despised him very quickly. To the point where I don't really care who did it. I'm pretty sure he deserved it.
Yeah.
Which actually, when you know the rest of the movie, they're playing on your sympathies on purpose. But yeah, so anyway, I feel bad raving about this movie for so long, But I'm so surprised that I went to a movie theater and paid to sit through a movie in 2017 that was well done and not not just Hollywood schlock.
Sure.
You know?
Sure. My mom loves mysteries, mystery movies and mystery stories and that kind of stuff. And I told her about this, and she was kind of like, "Oh, they've got Johnny Depp in it," you know, because the man has a reputation for the sort of acting and character he plays.
He doesn't. He's Johnny Depp turned down to like nothing.
Okay.
Everybody is in their role, and even Michelle Pfeiffer, she took me out of it, but she wasn't bad. Like I said, when you know who she actually is, she fits it better than you might have thought. But you don't know that until very late in the movie, so you're kind of like, who is this person flouncing around here?
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right.
But yeah, I definitely give it a recommendation.
If you are so inclined, you may enjoy watching the previous film version, also called Murder on the Orient Express. It was filmed in 1974. Has Albert Finney, Lauren Bacall, Ingrid Bergman, Sean Connery, Anthony Perkins, a Redgrave or two.
I assume Lauren Bacall was the Michelle Pfeiffer role.
You know, I actually can't answer that because I don't remember. I think some of your roles may have been renamed just a bit in this.
Yeah, I know that they played with some of the names a little bit.
Yeah, but yes, Lauren Bacall appears to be the same character as Michelle Pfeiffer. But
it's
quite an experience watching it. It's really good as well.
Yeah, I actually am now tempted to seek out to maybe read some Agatha Christie.
Yeah.
I would I'm a little sold on Poirot at this point.
Here's the thing you have to be aware of with Agatha Christie though. Okay, and I know this because I've read the books and whatnot.
Sure.
She writes a much different mystery than, say, Conan Doyle did.
Yeah, her claim to fame was the sudden surprise plot twist. Right?
Well, it's her infamy is not just the sudden surprise plot twist. It's the chunk of information that never appeared in the book until the solution comes up.
Yeah, that's which interestingly enough, I didn't know it until recently. There was a society of detective authors round about that period. And I believe Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was a member. And I have to look into this because I think I stumbled on it while I was researching the word of the week at some point. And they had developed a sort of code for writing a proper mystery. And the things that they banned were all the things that I hate in most mystery stories that absolutely fail to be mystery stories, because my one requirement for a mystery story is that I should be able to solve the mystery. So
yeah, and that doesn't work in Christie books.
Yeah.
At all.
Though I will say I actually and I do have a witness to this, very near the end, I turned to Tiny and, except for one minor detail, solved the mystery. I said, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And
it's probably also the only book you can actually do that with. I'm trying to find it right now. Oh, there, yeah, Murder by Death. There is a film called Murder by Death, which after you've watched, the other Murder on the Orient Express and read some Christie books and whatnot, you might wish to view this film just to give yourself a little further grounding, because it's a mystery movie, but in the same sort of way that Clue is a mystery movie. Okay.
Oh man.
Because Well, I'll just give you the premise. 5 famous literary detective characters and their sidekicks are invited to a bizarre mansion to solve an even stranger mystery.
So wait, it's like a comedy crossover fanfic mystery?
Yes, sort of. I have to. Okay, so basically it's a spoof on the styles of various mystery writers. I mean, I will tell you that there's a character in there called Jessica Marbles.
Okay.
Okay, you worked that out, Miss Marple, basically, right?
Well, wait, is it Miss Marple by way of Jessica Fletcher? Because wasn't She Wrote...
this is way earlier than that.
Oh, okay. Because Murder, She Wrote was basically inspired by Miss Marple, wasn't it?
Kind of.
Yeah.
You have Peter Falk in it playing Sam Diamond.
Okay, you just sold me.
All right.
Sam Diamond, I assume, is your Maltese Falcon. What the heck?
Yeah, Sam Spade. Right.
Dashiell Hammett. Thank you.
Yes, Dashiell Hammett. Right. And anyway, you've got a lot of comedy going on there, but also you have a comment being made about the nature of some of the more classic mystery stories.
Mm-hmm.
And what it's like to actually be in one, sort of. You know, to see it from the inside.
Huh.
By the way, the movie was made in 1976. And part of the cast list includes Fay Wray. Fay Wray, you remember being King Kong's victim in the original King Kong movie?
That's... Wow. Okay.
Yeah, she's in it. She plays the screaming doorbell.
Well, good for her.
Yeah. Yeah. But I recommend it. Murder by Death it's a fun movie to watch, and it will fill you in on some of the problems of the more famous literary detectives. And trying to create their stories.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Yes.
In talking about this and mentioning Dashiell Hammett, and we're talking about Agatha Christie, I am such an idiot.
Okay.
I just got something.
Yes.
From 15 years ago.
All right.
You ever have that thing where you suddenly realize that there was something in a movie or something? It's like, oh.
Yeah.
The names of the precogs in Minority Report.
Oh.
In Minority Report, the movie where they had the 3 psychics who could predict murders before they happened, and they were using them to stop crimes before they happened. The 3 precogs that were plugged into the police goo to predict murders. Right. Arthur, Dashiell, and Agatha.
You are correct.
Well played, Minority Report. Well played. That's actually, like, it's funny that, because I was in a conversation recently about several Philip K. Dick stories. Was it you? Did we discuss this?
I don't think so, but run it by me and we'll see what happens.
Okay. So, let's see. Do Androids Dream Electric Sheep? Obviously Blade Runner.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But Do Androids Dream Electric Sheep was a novel, or at least a novella.
Yeah, a novella, yeah.
Right. So it was a little bit of a longer form story. Mm-hmm. Okay? But Minority Report, we can recall it for you wholesale, which was Total Recall.
Yes, that became Total Recall.
And what's the other one? There was another Philip K. Dick.
You want a list of Philip K. Dick novels and stories that have been turned into movies?
I just want to remember which other one I'm thinking of. Anyway, it really doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because I have read the short stories, and I have also seen the movies. And
sure.
I'm going to say the original Total Recall in 1990, loved that movie.
A lot of fun.
Yep. It was a lot of fun. And also, I like the fact that at the end, there was, it left you with a question. It's like, wait a minute. You know, was
Yeah.
this all in his head or not? You know, you never get that answer.
Right. Did you want a Scanner Darkly?
Maybe no, that's not.
Okay.
You know what? I'm probably just thinking of Blade Runner because I'm thinking there were three, but a Minority Report with the Tom Cruise. I thought that was a really good movie.
Did you?
Yeah, I enjoyed that movie thoroughly.
Okay.
Okay, the stories absolutely nothing to do with the movies except for the fact that in Total Recall there is a guy who goes to a company to have a vacation memory implanted in his brain.
Right.
And that is the beginning and the end of the similarities between We Can Remember It For You Wholesale and Total Recall.
Yep.
The beginning and the end of it. I think one of the vacations was that he was going to take a trip to Mars, but that's it.
Yeah.
Minority Report. What if they had psychics who could predict crime and they used it to set up a crime department, a pre-crime department? Now, admittedly, you know, that's a little bit more in detail, but after that premise, it goes in a completely different direction.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying, and the short stories were good too. They're both good as completely separate entities. Though I know Minority Report had some mixed opinions on it. And I haven't seen the remake of Total Recall, so I can't speak to that at all.
I haven't either.
Yeah. But the thing is, I actually found the movies better than Philip K. Dick's short stories because Philip K. Dick was one of those writers, and I liked a lot of his short stories. I've read a lot of his short stories, but he was a gotcha type writer.
Oh yeah.
You know, he was the guy who was writing for the reveal at the end of the Twilight Zone episode.
Exactly.
And I mean, okay, I'm going to actually spoil Total Recall here.
Oh no.
Because it deserves spoiling. So if you want to go and read the short story, We Can Remember For You Wholesale, jump ahead like 3 minutes or whatever. Okay. So the plot of this book, because this is completely like the author jumping out of a box and yelling surprise. Okay. Guy, he's a schlub. He's down on his luck. He goes to this company to have a luxury vacation of his trip to Mars implanted in his head. Okay. During the procedure, they have a problem with it because he already has a memory, you know, that was implanted in his head. And when they try to implant a new memory in his head, they basically screw with that and he starts to have an aneurysm. And they're going through this whole thing. And they realize that he actually had a memory of taking a vacation to Mars. And that's why it was causing a problem, because they were trying to implant a memory that was a memory that he had suppressed in his brain. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of like what happens in the movie. So they figure the only way to cure this guy and to bring him out of his schizophrenia is to implant a memory, but they don't know what his life has been since his memory has been shot full of holes. So they have to invent a memory that is so bizarre and outlandish that it couldn't possibly be true. So that when they implant that, it'll just settle his brain down, if that makes sense.
Right.
So they finally settle on this. Okay, what if we say that we implant this memory that when he was 10 years old, he's out in a field and this alien from a super advanced civilization lands in front of him. And basically the alien wants to destroy the Earth because it doesn't think humanity is worthy. And so it scans this kid's brain. And when it discovers this kid's brain is so innocent and pure and filled with goodness, the alien decides not to destroy Earth. And thus, without knowing it, this guy has saved humanity. And this is the fictional memory they decide to implant in this person's brain because it's something so outlandish it couldn't happen. The last scene in the book is as they implant the memory, he goes schizoid again because it matches a memory in his head that's been suppressed. The end.
The end. Woo!
And I read this book, which is like, I want to read the book that Total Recall was based on. I like this movie. What?
Yeah.
But that's how he wrote. He wrote, surprise.
Yeah. Basically, that's according to the movie industry, the only thing Philip K. Dick is good at is writing interesting premises.
Yes. Yeah. Well, was he one of the ones who wrote Twilight Zone episodes?
I don't know.
Because he could have. He really
Yeah,
could have.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Because the Twilight Zone was a half hour of boredom in each episode, which you were just waiting for the camera to pull back and show you what the trick was.
Uh-huh.
Like, oh, the secret is, on this planet they're all really ugly and they've turned her into a beautiful woman and that's why she's upset. You know? No lie, that was actually a Twilight Zone plot.
And they were all toys in a barrel.
Right? And by the way, if you seek out Minority Report, that he yells out surprise 3 times. Because it's surprise, oh but, surprise, oh but, surprise, oh but, because there's time travel involved. So he gets to do it 3 times.
Nice. Yeah, I don't want to say I don't like those kind of stories because I actually do like those kind of stories, but they always annoy me when that happens, when it's like with the Christie stuff, when there is just absolutely no way you could have followed the logic from the start of the story to the end of the story and arrived at the ending of the story. That bothers me.
Yeah, well, like especially in a novel, like in a short story or, in any short form piece, that's kind of okay because that actually screws with your reader's brain. Because what happens is after you do that reveal, your reader's brain now has to reframe everything that they've experienced with the new information. Right. And so the brain is racing back and trying to remember all the details and whatever. And if it's a whole novel or, like a 2-hour movie that you're suddenly reframing, a lot of readers or watchers will actually just get fatigued by that process. They'll just get annoyed. Yes. Yeah. Whereas in a short story or like an episode of the Twilight Zone, especially if you know what you're getting, then that's kind of okay. It's like, oh, that's where he was going.
Sure.
The
problem is it happens so often or has been done so often that it's almost a cliche to the point where I don't know if you remember this film, Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah.
Okay, Jacob's Ladder, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sitting there in the theater. The opening credits or whatever are going on. The film is all of 3 minutes old, and I leaned over to the person next to me and I said, "He's already dead."
Do you know there's a remake of Jacob's Ladder in post-production right now?
Is there?
Yeah.
Well, I've just spoiled it for you. Ha 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 ha.
I had seen it, but I didn't know they were remaking it.
Yeah. I mean, it's that point where you sit down and you can predict what the film is going to do to you, or the story is going to do to you, and I don't know if it's a lack of artistry on the part of the creators, or whether it's just that it is so cliched anymore that it's easy to spot once you know what you're looking for.
Well, I mean, I think it's one of those things that kind of goes in and out of fashion. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, when it's been out of fashion for a while, when a writer does it, they don't think they're being cliched necessarily. They think they're being clever.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to give writers creators the benefit of the doubt here. Because it's not like if it were easy to create that sort of thing, because you have to create a story when you do that works on 2 levels. You have to create a story that works without the secret information right up to the climax. And then that story also has to work when completely reframed. And it's not my favorite type of storytelling either, though I enjoyed a lot of Philip K. Dick's work.
Yeah.
But though he also wrote a lot. So I say a lot, and I've read like two full collections of his short stories, and I think I've only read like a fifth of the short stories he wrote. And also one of his novels, The Eye in the Sky, and that one was weird because it was basically it was written during the McCarthy era. Mm-hmm. And it was a very strong political commentary without appearing to be. Though there were parts of it where it was much more overt. But it's sort of interesting to read a commentary on an era from someone who was inside the era at the time. You know, like often when we read about this stuff or learn about it, it's from the perspective of a modern person looking back in the past, you know, with perfect hindsight and full knowledge of everything that was going on. It's really interesting, and this goes for just about anything. It's always interesting to read a work of fiction from the period that it's in. You know, just
Yeah.
because you get a very different sense of how things were going on. You know.
You know, I was just thinking a lot of science fiction writers, if they are making the transition from the written word to a movie or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them don't get their stuff converted very well. I mean, a lot of it is like what happens with Philip K. Dick. It's just, oh, there's an interesting premise here. We're going to run with that.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking like Arthur C. Clarke.
Mm-hmm.
When a number of his books have been converted to film, but only in like the loosest sense. Strangely enough, probably the closest one is 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, we all know how that worked out.
But it was hugely expand. I like that movie. It was hugely expanded beyond what he had written.
I like the middle third of that movie that everybody likes.
Yeah. I like the whole thing, so there.
Fair enough. Yeah. No, but you know what? I think part of that too is just a problem of the genre, because science fiction, and this came up I think in Discord chat. The difference between science fiction and science fantasy is that science fiction is about exploring an idea or a premise and the effect that it will have on human beings. Mm-hmm. Because all stories are about human beings first and foremost. That's why they're interesting. But in order to really pull that off well, you have to be able to spend a lot of time with the idea and play with the premise and see it in different situations and stuff. So science fiction, you know, especially very cerebral science fiction, works very well in a novel. You know, but when you then have to translate it to, you know, a short visual work like a movie, you can't be overly cerebral. You know, like I even think of Jurassic Park, which I loved that book. And each of the characters and Crichton did this a lot because he loved to do his research on this stuff. So every character in a Crichton book became a representative for their field and also a representative for a certain view of the effect of science and technology on humanity.
Right.
You know, so, you know, like in the book, Ian Malcolm, he was the representation for chaos theory, or, you know, which was greatly like over exaggerated in the movie.
Sure.
But he also became a sort of representation of the nihilism that could result from the belief that nothing was inherently predictable. Okay, because he became like his over the top personality, and sort of devil may care attitude, and he was taken down a peg or two in the book. I mean, he was in the movie too, but he represented the effect of that idea on a human being, where if you take away the ability of science to predict the future and predict outcomes, which you could argue is exactly why we have science, you can end up with a person who either becomes completely depressed and nihilistic, or just completely off the wall to counteract the fact that they become nihilistic. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And all of Crichton's characters in some way represented that. You know, Grant in the book, he was, you know, obviously he's a paleontologist, and he was in his field, he was a progressive paleontologist. He had put forth certain ideas about dinosaurs being warm-blooded and the evolution of dinosaurs into birds at a time when those ideas were still not really, you know, commonly accepted the way they are now. And so he was a representation of those ideas, and he could be expositional on that. But he was also a representation of someone whose science was seen now as primitive as the world advanced. Because now he has these crises in the book where he's like, there's really no point in digging up dinosaurs if you can just create them and see what they were like. And then he also has the other crisis of faith where, you know, the dinosaurs that they were creating were not actually perfect recreations, and there was no way to know that for sure. So he was conflicted on all this stuff, and he became a representation of how the advancement of science makes the people who studied older science obsolete, and that's also an inherent part of the scientific method. As old science gets overtaken by the new, it also makes the people who studied that obsolete in a way. You know, they're relics. They laid the foundation, but like a foundation, they end up in the ground with a building built on top of them. You know? So, you know, and that's the sort of thing that you can play with in a book that, you know, it can, you know, in the movie, that entire crisis that he had in the book, that was only like, it was subtle. You really have to read into his character to see it. In the movie, that got distilled down to like 2 lines where he says, you know what this means? It means I'm out of a job. And Ian Malcolm laughs at him and says, don't you mean extinct? And that was the entire crisis of I'm becoming a relic of the past because my studies have now become obsolete. And the irony is, this is everything he dreamed of. He dreamed of someday being able to see a dinosaur. So he dreamed of putting himself out of work.
Yeah.
You know? And, wow. Okay. That we went kind of far afield.
So you liked Murder on the Orient Express?
I did. Let me do a character analysis of everyone in that.
Okay, good.
No, I kid. I do. I recommend it highly. 4 out of 5.
Well, that beats my news for the week.
What is your news for the week?
4 people have contacted me and or blamed me for them replaying bits of the Dragon Quest series.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those. In fact, I was one of those, I assume.
Yes.
I'm one of the 4.
Oh, 5 then. I guess it's 5. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You weren't counting me.
I wasn't counting you. But no, yeah, apparently it's my fault. Whatever. I'll take that blame.
Yeah. Hey, there are worse things to be blamed for.
That's right.
And just so that we can have a quick status update, where are you in the series now?
Okay, so quick status update. I am playing 6. I'm guessing I'm roughly halfway through 6. Characters are in their mid 20 levels, 25, 26, 27 up in there. I've got about 30 hours in on the game.
They're getting longer.
They are getting longer. Yeah, you showed me that list. They are getting longer. So far, I 6 is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because 6 is like they took all the neat bits out of all the previous games and crammed them all into one, and then forgot to sort of put any kind of real story around that.
Oh. Sort of a best of?
Kind of. Because by level 15, I had completed what was ostensibly the main quest of the game.
Oh. That's interesting. If you're still playing the game.
And the game is not over. Yeah, it is not over.
Yeah.
In fact, it's kind of embarrassing because there's dialogue within the game, between your characters and NPCs, where they ask you, things like, what are you doing here? What brings you to our kingdom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the character's actual in-game answer is, oh, I'm on a journey of self-discovery. Okay.
I'm sorry. I really didn't have anything to say to that.
I know. I don't either. It's like, yeah, okay. Meanwhile, is there any problem I can fix in your kingdom? It's like, Jesus.
Well, here's the thing, okay? I'm the protagonist of the game. The main quest is sort of petered out. Do you have any side quests I can do? I gotta go for another 60 hours at least.
That's exactly it. It's like everything after about level 15 is side quest. It has nothing to do with what you set out to do in the first place. It's like you're only questing because there are bits of the map you haven't been to yet.
So realistically, you could actually turn off the game and say you won.
I could, yes.
And the world would be an okay place.
And this is not something I have not done before with games. It's like my trouble with GTA 5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm handed, in the single-player campaign, I am handed a character who ostensibly wants to get his life back together, get it cleaned up, and stop making so many dumb mistakes.
And the entire rest of the story is about him making dumb mistakes and ruining it all for himself.
It's like, yeah, hey, I got to go kill a guy. Come with me, says one of his friends. and at that point, I'm like, no, the character's stated goal is to not do things like that. So I'm done playing.
So it's like,
I choose not to go on that. Hooray, my life is now better because of that choice. End of game.
The best thing you could do for the character is turn off the game.
That's right.
That is one of my favorite things about Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is it begins with there's 3 gems of power that will allow someone to essentially take over the world. Mm-hmm. There is a villain who would like those gems. The gems are hidden in 3 dungeons that are so magically protected and sealed that the villain cannot get at them. And his only thing that he can do is stamp his feet and curse the races that are guarding them. And even that won't get him the gems because they were sealed there by the gods of the world.
Yeah.
So what is your plot? Well, we'd better get those gems before he does. You get the 3 gems together.
Yeah.
Instant, like he's waiting outside the door.
Exactly.
Thanks for that. Kills you. You get basically knocked unconscious for 7 years and he destroys the world. I'm like, the best thing I could have done here was shut off the game.
That's right. Everything is fine just the way it is. Let's end where we're good. It's like one of those, isn't the evil overlord list? You know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's brilliantly funny. But one of the things in there is something along the lines of I will not wait for the heroes to bring me the thing I want. Mm-hmm. I will go get it instead. Something like that. I can't remember exactly how it's worded, but it's that kind of thing. It's like if the heroes had never set out to do whatever it was they were going to do in the first place, none of the rest of the bad stuff would have happened. It's just, yeah. So it was that kind of thing. And in this, it's like, okay, I did the stuff. We can be done now, right? I don't know what else to do. And it's really, the story is so poorly put together in Dragon Quest VI that there's actually a character whose sole reason for existence is to tell you where to go to find the next side quest.
I was just thinking about Chrono Trigger because toward the end of the game, you have completed most of the main quests and you're ready for the 3rd act. But each of the characters has some unresolved issues. And if you want to, you can go resolve their issues. And there is a main character there is a character whose sole purpose is to tell you where to go to begin resolving those issues. To be fair, because of time travel and where he resides, it does make a little bit more sense, but it's basically the same thing. Though it is nice. The actual closure on the character arcs is actually really nice. That's another thing I liked about Chrono Trigger.
That's good. But 6 has the whole, switching worlds. One world above the other kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It has the careers. Okay. And you can change careers and level up in careers and whatnot, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. It has the monster catching thing. It's got the coin collecting thing. Mm-hmm. And it's got a whole bunch of weird transportation stuff, Right. There's a flying bed, which I have already. You remember how late in the game you used to get the flying mode of transport?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, I have a flying bed, and I'm only, like I say, maybe halfway through the game at this point.
I'm sorry, is this a Disney movie? You have a flying bed? Are you fighting Nazis?
I don't know.
Cartoon lions? Does
don't
anybody
know.
actually remember that movie but me?
No, I remember Bedknobs and Broomsticks. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I remember it quite well.
Oh God.
But yeah, it's like oh, I don't have just one mode of water transport because I have to have one in each world, right?
Of course.
I've got what is essentially the Jesus ship in one world.
The Jesus ship?
Yeah, the Jesus ship. It's the ship. It's the only ship apparently in this entire world capable of carrying me from place to place across the Central Ocean, and it's owned by the major religion.
Oh, okay. All right.
So
I was waiting to see how
ship.
Jesus came into it and to see who we were going to offend by discussing it.
Yes. It's owned by the major religion. That's what I have in one world. In
Okay.
the other world, I have an entire island I can sail around on my own.
That's like a whole island?
Yes, like a whole island with a bar and a jail.
Those are the two amenities?
Yes. It's like, okay.
Well, I guess if you're going to build a bar, you got to have some place to have the belligerents sleep it off.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun in a way, but it's also very tedious in a way.
Yeah. Wait till 7, man.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you make of 7.
I don't know.
I couldn't get through 7.
Yeah.
No.
6
I also
is
didn't have
rough.
that kind of time in my life.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I should mention this because you mentioned it.
Yes.
If there is a video game that you are curious about, if you have enough time in your life to beat it, there is an excellent website that I use called How Long to Beat, which will tell you without any spoilers how long, based on various play styles, it takes people to beat these games. If you're a casual player, if you're a completionist, and if you're an absolute psychotic rabid 100%er.
Here we go. Dragon Quest VI, Realms of Revelation. The main story, it says, takes 41 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like that's going to be inaccurate for my run, because I'm already at 30 and I'm halfway through. The main quest... first off, it's inaccurate because the main story actually ended, 20 levels ago.
Mm-hmm.
At about hour 12. But yeah, main and extras are 48 and a half hours. Completionist, it says, is 62 hours.
Maybe they're considering the main story to be like you actually could have turned off the game.
Yeah, I don't know. I note that Dragon Quest VII is main story at 74 hours, so that's quite a jump.
Yeah, well, let me tell you something. Because I played it, I didn't play the remake. I tried to play the original, which came out in 2001 for the PlayStation. And if you look that one up, main story is 104 hours.
Oh.
Plus extra content is 134. And if you're a completionist, 257. And that is why I never beat that game, because after getting a few hours into that game, I believed that it was going to take me 104 hours. I believed that it was going to take me, what is that, like five, or I guess 4 and a bit straight days?
So yeah, I'm kind of bogged down in 6 at the moment. It's not bad enough to quit, but it is just on the cusp of bad enough to not really want to play it as consistently. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, is it possible? Is there any possibility that you might also be having series fatigue?
I don't think so, because I'm all about playing Dragon Quest Heroes.
Okay. Well, yeah, but Dragon Quest Heroes
it's a considerably different experience.
It's a very different game.
Yeah. I think there's enough variety, and that's kind of what's keeping me going through the just the regular main Dragon Quest series, is that each game is a different enough experience up until this point that I don't feel like I'm doing the same things over and over and over again.
Yes, the only reason I ask because it's interesting because I've been on a retro game kick, obviously, and after I did Dragon Quest III or Dragon Warrior 3 at your behest, or at least at your accidental urging, I then went on to do Chrono Trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I was gonna go do Super Mario RPG, which was another
Yeah.
Super Nintendo role playing game that I loved. But I found that I suddenly was a little bit fatigued on turn based RPGs for a little while.
Right.
So instead, I am playing through a game that I played and never beat, Secret of Mana,
Oh.
which actually began its life in America as a spin-off of the Final Fantasy series, but it's more action oriented. It's
Mm-hmm.
you run around and swing a sword in an overall. It's the gameplay is very very vaguely Zelda like.
Hmm.
So it's more of an action RPG.
Okay.
And what I did not realize about that until I looked it up is that when they ported it to America, um, they gave the localization guy, who was one guy, Ted Woolsey, famous localizer, 1 month to do it,
Mm.
and they would not reprogram the text engine. And because English text takes so much longer to display, takes so many more characters to display ideas, we talked about that.
Yeah. 280.
He had to cut 2/3 of the text from the game.
Mm.
I remember being baffled by what the hell was going on in this game. Now, playing through it again and knowing that, I am stunned that I can actually make sense of the story at all. Because the story does make sense. It's very, it's like a Cliff Notes story. It's, go here because this. Okay.
Yeah.
Now go here because this. The Empire's evil. Okay. They stole this thing. It's important because it's a plot MacGuffin. Okay. That's it. They couldn't go into any detail.
At the risk of making this what is really just supposed to be a perfunctory opening to the show even longer, I do have to back up and ask you, what did you think of Dragon Quest III?
I did enjoy it. One of the things that surprised me was because I've been down on the turn-based combat stuff because I find that in terms of gameplay, I find it dull. It doesn't really engage my brain.
Right.
But what I found with Dragon Quest is because the fights are a little bit harder than the fights that like in the Final Fantasy stuff. And this is also, I know that they reduced the difficulty drastically in the Final Fantasy games for an American audience. I understand that. Please don't tell me. But because of the peculiarities of the combat engine, where there are certain limitations on how you can choose your target and what happens if somebody is targeting something that dies, and the various, your characters have limited magical resources and whatever, and because I take manual control of the characters, I did find it more engaging than I remember it being, because I was using my tactical. I was trying to get through every fight as efficiently as possible.
Sure.
So, I'm engaging my tactical brain to see like, well, this character moves before this character. So this character has to target this, because they're going to hit first. Right. And then if they're going to hit first, then I can't cast this spell because this spell's going to be wasted. So, and I found myself doing those sorts of things in every combat. So I found myself enjoying the combat more. And it actually got me thinking a little bit about D&D, but and combat options, especially for fighters in D&D. But that has not gelled into anything that I'm ready to discuss yet.
Okay.
So we'll leave that on the back burner, or it might end up in an article or something. But all of that aside, I enjoyed it. I do really like the structure of Dragon Quest III. As a campaign structure, which I alluded to. And that actually helped me put the ideas that I just put out in an article that came out. Well, it came out yesterday, but if you're listening to this, I guess it came out a week and a half ago. I don't know.
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago? Yeah, whatever. So, and that's the one that's about training bras,
Uh-huh.
which is basically about plot structure.
Yep.
So, so some good came out of it, and it did like rekindle my love for the old school RPGs, which then got me to replay Chrono Trigger. And then I'm gonna do Super Mario RPG, so that I'm experiencing different types of RPGs. And then I think I also want to look at Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, which is a later one, but it did some interesting stuff. So yeah, I enjoyed it, I guess is the answer.
Okay.
What was the question?
Cool. No, that was it. Yeah, I'm glad you did actually.
I'm not cursing your name for replaying it. Let's
Oh, good.
Let's say
I'm
that.
so happy to hear that, sir. Ambassador Jolly Red Giant, who wrote into us via email, that would be digressionsanddragons@gmail.com. Wrote in to say some very nice things about, technically they're not very nice things.
Yeah, he's using the phrase "made me sad."
Yeah, he was in agreement. Let's put it that way. He was in agreement with you about making money to DM, D&D and that kind of stuff. But he does go on to say, and then I stopped worrying about it.
Yeah, well, go ahead and share his little piece, because it's actually really well written, and I think there's an important lesson in it.
Angry's rant about why everything has to be about making money and getting those views and subs these days made me sad. And then I stopped worrying about it. As I was listening to the podcast on Sunday morning, I was thinking about my Saturday spent DMing for 6 folks I've known for years, one of whom I'm married to. Eating chili, laughing as a froghemoth swallowed 2 PCs, and just having a great time. I think most DMs are like me, and most groups are like us. We don't podcast, we don't live stream, and we aren't selling our DM screens to the highest bidder. We're just enjoying good friends, good food, and good times. I know that if I invested in some Dwarven Forge, I'd have the visual presentation to go along with my skills, and I could earn some cash. But honestly, I go to work and earn my paycheck, and I'd rather not turn my hobby into a side hustle. Anyway, there's plenty of us out there, probably the overwhelming majority. We're just not getting the buzz, and that's fine. We don't need it.
Jolly Red Giant. There is a very, 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 very useful and important point that you made in there, and I don't want to belabor this. And then I stopped worrying about it part, because I realized that on the show, and to a lesser extent, or sometimes a greater extent, depending on the topic, Brian, we do get passionate about these topics that we discuss. And it did, in that moment, I was genuinely sad for these people, because I'm like, how, they're not enjoying the hobby. They're just treating it like a hustle. But you're absolutely right. They are not everybody. And, honestly, if that is giving them joy and money, and they feel that's good, then more power to them. They deserve that. I'm not going to take that from them. And so worrying about the way other people enjoy things, or whether they're not enjoying it the same way I am, or they're doing something for a different reason. They're not doing it for pleasure. They're doing it for money. It's really a waste of my emotions. It's not worth getting worked up about. I mean, we can get worked up into the moment because we're going to look at it, and then you're going to have that emotional response. Well, look at what's happening. This makes me feel terrible. And what you did was really smart, because, this is right. This makes me feel terrible. Oh, but I'm having fun. Meh, who cares? So yeah, that's really good. Also, I do feel like maybe I'm a little bit of a hypocrite, because I guess to some extent I am selling my, at least my DMing knowledge to the highest bidders here.
Yeah.
And we are podcasting.
We talked about that too, but we're not,
But yeah,
I feel like it's different, point. But then maybe I just feel like it's different because it's just us.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, neither of us really set out, there is no attempt you and I did not we're not trying to get rich doing this.
No.
We have no illusions about that. And even monetizing the Angry GM site through Patreon, I did the Angry GM site for 6 years for free and built up my following there. And my job was forcing me to quit doing that and also to not pursue publishing. And when I mentioned that to people, they said, well, let us pay you instead. And I was actually convinced by them to put up the Patreon. And I'm honestly glad that I did, because except for some recent struggles, I have been far more productive on the website than I ever was before I was accountable to people. And I really wish my great fans would stop being so understanding and get a little more pissed off at me when I am, I don't want to say slacking off, because obviously a lot's going on, but I would love for people to start yelling at me and threatening me a little bit, because you know what? At this point, I deserve a kick in the ass.
Yeah, definitely not trying to get rich off of this.
Right.
Anybody who would like to try to make me rich off of this, please feel free. But
yeah, I wouldn't mind the rich and famous contract.
Yeah. In fact, you don't even have to make me rich. You just have to get me above the poverty line. That's fine. I'm humble. I don't need much. But yeah, it's not about the money.
No.
And honestly, if that guy's happy doing it and it's pleasing him, and he's also got some capability to pay the bills, fine, whatever. Ambassador Edge Damodred. That's what he says his name is, and I can't argue with it because he didn't give me any alternatives. Wrote in on the website for episode 8, talking about the magic system, where magic does things that are normally possible. And we had that discussion.
Yeah, what if magic could only do things that people could do? It just
right, because we were talking about low magic systems and that, or not low magic. That was episode 9. Whatever. We're talking about the plug and play. Yeah. Anyway, point being, we were talking about magic somehow. Mm-hmm. He wanted to point out that in the Death's Gate novels by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, they have a much similar magic system to that. And he said magic was just altering a probability wave, causing events that were not likely to happen. The less likely it is to happen, and the more magical power it takes. The major consequence of this system is the flow of natural events will eventually push back and try to right itself in proportion to the altered events.
That sounds neat.
It also sounds familiar, and I know I've never read Death's Gate.
Yeah, well, I can't help but think there are certain elements of early Discworld books that reflect
might be it.
That, and also it is very similar to the finite improbability generators and infinite improbability drive in the Hitchhiker's Guide series. And it does sound neat enough that I might be curious to check out one of the Death's Gate novels. The only little issue that this gives me an itch, because it's very sciencey for magic.
Right.
Because it's very much, what if magic was quantum physics? And I like my science fiction and my fantasy to have nice walls between
something in my head about magic. Magic only works because there's no reason for that thing not to happen there in that place.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like I can't explain it because I've only got about half of it grabbed in my head right now.
So check back in a future episode when we remember what Brian is trying to think of.
Right. He also wanted to point out, did Edge Damodred, or I keep saying Damodred, it's Demodred. Edge Demodred. Is that how you read Demodred? Yeah, anyway. He'll inform me if something is wrong.
I don't know.
Demodred. Anyway,
I just keep seeing the name of the Wheel of Time character.
There you go.
The Damodred family, or the Demand. No, one of the basically Arc Devils was Demandred.
Yeah. Anyway, the other thing he wanted to point out is because we were also talking about if you can't play face to face, or if you not if you can't play face to face, but if you wanted real deep immersion in characters, that the way to do it was to do an online game where you only typed, you know, that kind of thing. He wanted to point out that the Neverwinter Nights and Neverwinter Nights 2 gave you visual elements along with only the ability to text chat. Because you can, for those who don't know, you can build scenarios and just like a regular adventure in Neverwinter Nights. And
you can also, as the GM, be an active presence in the adventure to modify or change events.
Right.
Which to me is the equivalent of GMing while having both of your arms tied to separate windmills. They're both spinning in different directions. I tried running games through Neverwinter's Nights, and yeah.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting option.
You'll be happy to know that just like within the last day or two, they've announced that Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition is coming.
Of course they are.
Yeah. Which is basically the Diamond Edition, all shined up and polished and made neat again, I guess.
Yeah, it's the re-enhanced edition.
Yeah.
But yeah, no kidding, because that's all they got there. I mean, that was the same countdown that they had the same countdown running, and it was like, surprise, we're repolishing Planescape. And then they had a new countdown. It's like, oh, what could it be? What could it be? What could it be? Surprise, we're redoing Neverwinter Nights. And it's just, you can just randomly pick one of the properties, and that's what they're doing.
There you go.
They're going to start a new clock, and it's going to be Icewind Dale.
Yeah, you're probably right. It would not surprise me. Would not surprise me.
Go to Good Old Games. The games still run.
Yeah.
Okay, and they're perfectly fine. And they're text-based isometric RPGs. They don't need much. What are they enhancing? Well, great. Now that character that's less than an inch tall is in, 1080p. Great. Fantastic.
He's a 4K blur. Ambassador Dan wrote in on email. He says, for those of us who want to be more aware of what's going on in the RPG world, what do you recommend we read or listen to? Podcasts, blogs, Twitter feeds, or something else? How do you two keep up with RPG news? We don't.
I do. But I don't know if my method will work for everybody. Because...
Well, you tell us yours, and then I will tell you what amounts to mine.
Okay, so my method is spend 9 years building up an online presence as a game master and a dealer of advice, and get a very, very large following in the online internet gaming community, and then let them just tell you everything that's going on. The only way I know about anything going on at this point is because somebody, hey, Angry, did you see this? Oh, yeah, I did now because I just clicked on it. I don't have, it's just so, give that a try.
Yeah, see if that works for you.
I hate to be flippant, but really I don't. I don't keep up with the news, and if people didn't tell me about this stuff, I wouldn't know.
Yeah. My method is somewhat similar to yours.
This isn't wait until I tell you about something, is it?
Yeah, that's about it.
So befriend someone who has built up...
Find someone who's been online for 9 years, built up a following, and then follow them.
Actually, there's a third strategy that might work really well specifically for Dan.
Yes.
Wait for someone to build up an online presence and get told all the news. Wait for him to find a friend to converse with all the news about, and then hope that the two of them throw a podcast out there.
Yep. There you go. I mean, the only other thing I do, because sometimes I pull in news stories to the show, obviously.
Yeah.
The only other thing I do is I use Google News and just set up like a little form that automatically polls whatever topic I'm interested in. So in this case, I have one that's just tabletop RPGs or tabletop role-playing games. And anytime there's a news story about that, it populates into that eventually. But it's not a consistent thing. It's not a regular thing. And frankly, the stories are so few and far between that it'll sit on the same ones for weeks on end. So, but honestly, I mean, there's all kinds of news we miss.
Yeah.
We just don't hear about it with different systems that are coming out, or, people who are doing special things or whatever.
Yeah, honestly, if you're focused on just 1 or 2 or 3 games, then probably there's not a whole lot of news. The RPG industry is not exactly one that like turns on a dime.
Mm-mm.
It's like it's not even the sort of industry where like EA is screwing up every week so bad that the government is now regulating their industry.
Yeah.
But which, by the way, I actually follow, like, if you were asking about video game news, there's like 6 or 7 different YouTube channels I follow just so that I can laugh at the dumpster fire that has become of the video game industry.
It's boy, let's not launch on that, or we'll never get to the other thing we're talking about.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, yeah, so in terms, because basically there's 2 big, well, maybe 3 now. There's 2 big times the RPG industry is going to jump out at you and present you with news.
We're releasing a new edition.
No.
Oh?
No, it's even more defined than that.
Okay.
Origins and Gen Con.
Fair enough. Mm-hmm.
Okay? As long as you're paying attention around those times, you will get 90% of the news. The other 10% will come to you by simply watching Kickstarter.
But, actually what's really interesting, as we're talking about this now, and now I'm afraid that this could turn into an entire giant tangent.
Okay.
But there are no good, large, single professional source, like aggregators of RPG news, in the same way that there were like the IGNs and the Niche Gamers and all the other the sites that report on video game news.
Mm-hmm.
There really isn't a good source for that. And I don't know whether it's just that there's not enough to write about, so that we would have to start, complaining about, to fill the off weeks, would you have to, complain about which product is offending which people now or whatever, or is it just that our industry is so small? But there really isn't a centralized, like any centralized hub for that sort of reporting, which also, now that I think about it, makes it really hard to market. Every company has to sort of invent its own marketing.
I'm going to say a sentence, and I know I'm going to say it, and it will be factually incorrect by the time I'm finished saying it.
Okay.
But I'm going to say it anyway, because this is the general appearance of how things are.
Sure. Go to town.
There is no site on the internet that exclusively does what you're talking about.
Okay.
And yet,
well, there are sites out there, but the problem is they're not something that everybody says is the source for it.
Right.
It's all very diffuse.
Yeah,
there are corners of the internet out there, I'm sure.
There's no general place that everybody agrees A, has to get a press release,
mm-hmm.
and B, has to be referred to see if the news is actually accurate.
Right.
That paper of record. That's the phrase I'm looking for.
Okay, yeah.
There's no quote unquote paper of record for tabletop gaming news.
Right. There's no Associated Press. There's no New York Times or.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I mean by paper of record is it is deemed the news source by which all events are recorded.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore you can go to it at any time and begin digging into its archives to trace news back to its original source, original reporting, etc.
Right.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I shouldn't really have said the AP because that's not really what they do. It really is. I think in the United States, it's still considered the New York Times is pretty much the paper of record, isn't it? But yeah, okay, this is why I was thinking that, because New York Times was, when they coined the phrase newspaper of record, they were referring originally to the New York Times. And then that grew into a phrase.
Anyway, there are at least 3 I am aware of in the United States, and it's generally arranged by major regions. Like I say, East Coast, West Coast, and then kind of the Midwest. You know,
the East Coast, West Coast, and the place you fly over to get from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Yeah, all the bits. The point being, there is no website like that for tabletop gaming. Some people are going to jump up and down and say, Board Game Geek, Board Game Geek. No.
Mm-hmm.
Board Game Geek is too diffuse and too large, with too much other things going on and too much other information to be a paper of record for tabletop gaming.
Right.
Okay. I think part of the stipulation of being a paper of record is that reporting about the news has to go on as well. Right. Not just simply an aggregation of news. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and you're right.
You need to be able to get from them to their original source.
Yeah.
That's the whole point, which means if they're reporting on reporting or aggregating the news, then there's a middleman. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, if they're aggregating the news, then there's a middleman because you have to go to the site they're aggregating from to get to their sources.
Correct.
They didn't get the sources themselves.
So anyway, that would make the gathering of news from the gaming community much easier.
Yeah.
Because what happens when you get a place like that is automatically all the game companies begin sending information to them. Mm-hmm. Okay, that it becomes like, just like, you know, they always post on Facebook, they always will then send things to whatever in this case, I guess, website of record would be.
Yeah.
And so they would get that information plus their own original reporting on what's going on out there would be there as well. And then it just becomes the place people can go to and know they can find information on a given story or a given thing. As it is now, everything is everywhere. It's just like, and I don't mean like you can go anywhere and find it. I mean like it's just there's 1,700 different directions for gaming news to go. Mm-hmm. And you're never sure which one it's going to go to at any given time. I used to collect news articles and whatnot for EN World.
Right.
Just about board gaming. And that was a chore and a half. Basically, if you weren't on the list for the press releases or their mailings or whatever, you didn't know where to look for anything. You couldn't even rely on a company putting it up on their own website.
Yeah.
But there you go. It used to be a lot easier with RSS feeds and Google Reader, but now not so much.
You know, honestly, I hate to say this, but because I'm a relic of the past here, but it used to be so much easier when every month they brought a magazine filled with gaming news to your house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah.
So, I understand a new book has come out for D&D, and it's something about goldfish.
Yeah. Stupid goldfish. Like,
I don't understand.
I don't either.
Is this a piece of lore I'm missing? Is this...
Not that I know of. Okay, I don't claim to be any great expert because it's okay. So Xanathar's Guide to Everything obviously is what we're talking about. And
okay.
Yeah. Xanathar is a Forgotten Realms character. Because that's what we're doing now. We're throwing the random name of a random character into the title of a book. Mm-hmm. You know, Volo's Guide to Monsters and now Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Xanathar was a crime lord. He was a basically a mobster. He was also a beholder. He lived underneath the city of Waterdeep in the vast dungeon known as Undermountain. And he took it all over, ruled from the city of Skullport, with the underground city of Skullport. Over the years, it was gradually revealed that there might have been several Xanathars. And his name's Xanathar may have been a title. He may have been the Xanathar, whatever that means. And also, he made most of his fortune as a slaver. Mm-hmm. He was also famous for interrogating absolutely everybody that he could and building a vast knowledge, vast understanding of the world. So I guess that's where we're getting with Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And keeping this in mind, wait. I want to be sure I understand this, okay? So that I have some context for this book we're going to look at.
Yes, this book. Go ahead.
Okay. So what you're telling me is that this book is theoretically from the perspective of a beholder, crime lord, and slaver.
Yes. Who has been a slaver and crime lord possibly for centuries. Okay. But we know that this book is from the perspective of that character because of his constant interjections throughout the text. Right?
Excellent. Good. It's good to have context in the text for what's going on.
Right. So, Xanathar's Guide to Everything.
Yes. What is actually in the book that we care about?
Okay. First of all, I guess just a very quick hot take, because I don't want to do a damn review. Okay, we're not here to do reviews.
No.
But at the same time, if we don't talk about what's in the book, basically, this book is a supplement to Dungeons & Dragons. You get 3 major things in it. First, you get a bunch of character options, which basically boil down to a bunch of alternate builds for the character classes that already exist. There are no new classes, merely new options for the classes that exist. Related to that, the second thing that you get is a whole bunch of new spells. And then in the middle of the book, you get what they refer to as Dungeon Master's Tools. And I think when you and I both looked through this book, that was where we focused most of our attention.
It was hard not to focus most of your attention there, and there's a very good reason for that, which I'm sure we will get to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, well, let me ask you a question now.
Yes.
Because, I think as we were looking through the book, we did notice the numerous witty interjections.
We did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And now, with a better understanding of who Xanathar's character is,
how is he in charge of anything? How?
Oh my God. Let me tell you something. People who had gotten copies of the book, early releases through the game store or whatever, had started sharing some of these little side, because what there is in the book is there's all these little random sidebars of comments and annotations that Xanathar has made, signed with a little eyeball.
Witty observations.
They're not observations.
No.
Okay. And as I was reading through all of them that people were posting, I was like, I'm not getting this book. I am not putting money into this book, because it's like a sitcom character. It's like after each one, that little eyeball is like him looking at the camera and waiting for the laugh track to end.
He's the Mr. Roper of D&D.
Right. He's not that charismatic.
People out there going, Mr. Roper, what does he mean by that?
Right? Ask your parents, kids.
Yes, ask your parents. I'm not going to explain it. Those of you who know, you know and you understand. Boy. Okay. Do you want to start with the comments?
Yeah, we might as well.
Okay.
So you have this thing, this beholder. Let's be honest, he's a beholder, crime lord, slaver.
Mm-hmm.
They tell you probably 2 or 3 times in here that he's sort of he's the Wikipedia of D&D, because he has gone out and sourced all kinds of information from absolutely everybody he's ever come across.
Right.
What he's done with that information is apparently entirely misunderstood it or forgotten it.
Yeah, well, my impression is that after several centuries of running this endeavor, he has become ridiculously senile.
Yes.
Which I think is why, like, the goldfish is so important. I think, like, his assistants bought it for him.
Uh-huh.
You know, so they can keep running his crime empire for him, and he just takes care of the fish all day and writes comments in the sides of books.
Yeah. He's a victim of the Peter principle.
Right?
Okay, he has risen to his level of incompetence, and apparently that is being in charge of a thieves guild or a slaving guild or whatever it is he's in charge of.
But what kills me, because I'm going to share one of my favorites right now. I know you have a couple of favorites.
Yes. I do.
One of my favorites is on page 43 of the book.
Page 43 of the book.
Where he says, "You can't walk to the horizon because it keeps on getting farther away." Boom! Did I just blow your mind? I did, didn't I?
Yeah.
That is not something that comes out of the mouth of a centuries-old beholder slave lord. That is something that comes out of a mind of a teenager at a food court who is under the influence of mind-altering substances. You can't walk to the horizon because it keeps getting farther away. Did I just blow your mind? I did, didn't I? Right? That's that's what that is. Like, and people are like laughing their rear ends off over this. And all I can think about is, like, when did this become a comedy product? I mean, it would be neat if they actually used these annotations to reveal interesting stuff about the world. Right? Like, draw us into the universe. Or no, let's just have these little comedic asides.
My contention is he doesn't know what universe he's in. He doesn't even understand he doesn't even understand the basics of the world he claims to be in. And I can prove that to you in one quote.
Yeah, go ahead.
Bottom of page 35.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good one.
So you have this soul, but you can't see it or touch it? And when you die, this invisible thing leaves your body and goes to a place you can't see? And you people think I'm crazy? Remind me your favorite phrase about the deities of D&D.
They exist.
You can prove
their existence
they
is proof. Yes, thank you. The soul, the existence of the soul is provable in D&D because with the right combination of spells, you can remove it from a person and have it in a jar and see it.
Right.
And he knows those spells.
Mm-hmm.
This is just like the snarky little, I'm the hipster clever atheist, shooting holes in the stupid religious people.
Yeah.
You know? That really is. That quote is jerk atheist on the internet.
Yeah.
On that same page, by the way, is the dad joke.
Yo, the dad joke, yeah.
Yeah. Why did the samurai cross the road? Now you say why. Okay, here's the joke part. I can say, good. My delivery was terrible.
No, it's fine.
I can say, get it? What? Why aren't you laughing? The joke is solid, and my delivery was perfect. Maybe you didn't get it because you're stupid. Wow, that ended mean. So that's not really a dad joke.
No. That's no. That's
Go ahead.
There's a lot of problems with this character, Xanathar. Just on the and the overall impression you get is that if this book is Xanathar's guide to everything, then virtually all of the information in it is somehow wrong.
There is one, and I can't remember where it is, where he actually does not have any knowledge of human reproduction.
Yeah.
And then ultimately he pronounces it icky. Okay? I'm sorry. Okay? First of all, like, that doesn't, on the face of it, he does not know how his primary product is manufactured. He's a slaver.
Exactly.
And I hate to say it, but in Waterdeep, one of the primary uses for slaves is for adult purposes.
Mm-hmm.
You know your product, know your market. He's supposed to be the best at this. I don't buy it.
Uh-huh.
Could you imagine Don Corleone or Jabba the Hutt saying any of these lines?
No. I suspect, though, there is some subversive behavior somewhere within the ranks of WotC.
What makes you say that?
Somebody got a crack at writing one of his quotes on page 48.
Yeah.
And I will read it to you.
Yeah, okay.
Divine? Arcane? What difference does it make where magic comes from? You've got it or you don't. Fortunately, I've got loads of this stuff. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Has it not been said before by us and by others there is really no distinction between divine and arcane magic?
Yeah, that they've stopped caring?
Yeah, within the current editions of D&D. So, who have you got on the inside over there?
You're right. But you know what? This is what kills it. If I was writing like the Angry GM's Guide to D&D, I would do this trick too, but at least I would have a consistent tone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it would all be the same character.
Yeah, it's problematic. And frankly, as far as I'm concerned, it subtracts from the book.
It really does. Because you read them all. As you go through the book, you stop at every one, and every one of them gets worse. And if you are out there and you enjoy them and think they make the product better, you are wrong and bad and should feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay.
It's not often we say that.
I understand if you don't want to say that, but I'm saying it. I can say that from behind my mask. People expect that of me.
All right.
But can I say, now, segueing out of the sidebar thing here, though?
Yes.
Because you actually brought up something that is the one comment I want to make about the character classes. Because otherwise, I don't really care. They're just character class options. And we've seen a good half of them because they're all Unearthed Arcana classes.
Right.
Or at least half of them are. Okay? In the vein of that whole divine arcane, what does it matter? There are a lot of class builds that are basically designed to erode the distinction between the classes. Okay? There's a build for barbarians who wish they were druids instead. There's a build for bards who wishes they were rogues. There's a build for paladins who wishes he could be evil. There's all these builds for, man, I'm playing this class, but I wish I could play this other class too. And it's just multi-class. The option exists.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, I think like the point, maybe your class should be a little special. Maybe it should represent something. And if you feel like you wanted to be a different class, be a different class. I like the sorcerer that wants to be a cleric.
Because there's no conflict there.
The warlock that wishes that he could be an evil paladin and would have been an evil paladin if the option existed, but he didn't look back those pages to see he was an evil paladin, so now he's a warlock instead. And then he took this build and I mean there are some okay builds in here too. I'm not going to deny that. They do some very interesting things with the build. And if they were more focused on some specific like there's 2 builds that are Oriental themed, and there's a couple of builds that are like steampunk themed, and if they had picked say 3 themes, like say Oriental, steampunk, and Fae, and just presented one class build that would fit each of those themes for every class, this book would be infinitely more useful. Because then you could, use these as themes in your campaign. As it is, it's like a complete just grab bag. It's like, well, we had these classes sitting around. Let's put them in a book. And they're terrible. Anyway, but that's all I wanted to say about the class. I don't want to discuss the classes. I don't even want to discuss the spells. The spells are not really treading any new ground. There's a few cute tricks in there. Nothing new. Nothing new in the universe.
Yeah, I am going to have something to say about the spells eventually, but not yet.
Okay.
I will hold that for later.
All right. Then where are we at?
Well, that leaves us, if you're done with the classes and you're done with the spells, then that leaves us the DM tools.
This is hard. Okay? This is hard because I actually genuinely like the stuff that is in this chapter. Mostly.
Yeah.
Okay? And, there's a couple of things that are really, really cool in here. Okay? There are write-ups on the tool proficiencies that are akin to the write-ups on the skills. Or at least akin to the action in the chapter on the game rules, where it talks about different actions you can take with different abilities and skills and how to set the DCs on them in different possible actions. This actually goes through all those tool proficiencies and suggests some possible uses and ways they could be used in the game, and gives some guidance on how to set the DC. And also, there's some really interesting stuff in here, in Carpenter's tools. There's a little write-up on, hey, if you need to construct a temporary shelter, here's a way to do it. That's kind of neat. You did write up on forgery and disguise comes up a lot. There's a neat thing in the gaming set on, if you can use your gambling skill if you can draw someone into a game as an alternative to insight for learning their personality because you're playing a game with them. So, those little things, those are really, really neat little ideas.
I agree with you. It's a neat little section that adds something quantifiable and quality-wise to the game.
Yeah, and that's it. It adds both thematic content and also gives you the mechanics to back them up. But then I immediately look at this stuff, which is central to running a game, because every character class has a tool proficiency thanks to their background, or just about every one. Every character has at least one tool proficiency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then my question is, wow, this is really useful and neat stuff. And why isn't it in the player's handbook or the DM's guide? This is core level stuff here.
Yeah.
There's write-ups on spellcasting, on how easy is it to notice a spell being cast. If somebody is casting Charm Person on you and it works or doesn't work or whatever, do you notice it? What about if someone's standing at the back of a room casting a spell? Are they noticeable? Whatever. And how can you identify a spell as it's being cast? And this is, again, useful stuff. It came up in my game last week. That, hey, if I'm casting a spell on, I'm trying to cast Charm on this person, and it doesn't work, are they going to know what happened? And or can other people notice it? Can I sit there and cast Charm on someone? And it's yeah, these are really good spellcasting rules that are literally should be part of the core spellcasting rules. So that's the problem, is every time I hit something in the book that I'm like, this is really useful, or this is really well done, I hit a feeling of, why did I have to wait 3 years for this? Because then I compare it to the pile of random essays presented in no particular order that they sold me for $50 and called a Dungeon Master's Guide. There is a write-up in the back of this book. It's an appendix on how to structure a campaign for multiple GMs to run from. Like a living campaign or a shared campaign, they call it. They call it a shared campaign. It is both shorter and more detailed than the discussion on running a completely normal campaign that exists in the DM's guide, which is just loaded with empty bloat and doesn't say anything useful. So again, I'm like, if they could have given me a write-up akin to this in this number of pages in the DM's guide, I wouldn't have been so depressed about that book. The trap section is one that I really like too.
Oh, geez. Yeah, they have a trap section now.
Yeah, well, there was a trap section in the DMG. It's just, it was more like, there's just this.
It didn't tell you anything, though.
It gave you a list of traps, and
it didn't tell you anything, though.
You know what? Okay, actually, I have a really good analogy. The trap section in this is rigorous. It offers two types of traps. Simple traps, which are basically one and done type traps, like crossbows and pit traps and stuff like that. And then there's complex traps, which are encounter level traps, like the hallway filled with swinging blades and spears that the party has to run through, or the Indiana Jones style traps that are an entire room and an entire encounter. And they are presented with descriptions, advice, and also rigorous mechanics, so that every trap has called out what level it is, what type of trap it is, what triggers it, what are countermeasures, the effects that it has. And these are all flagged. There's actually a system for laying it out. As opposed to the DM's guide, where there were 3 paragraphs of text with the rules for the trap buried in them, and no 2 walls of text looked alike. Because there was no ring. And it looked like, I've done this before on my website, where I have an idea for a rule, right? Or a system. And I haven't had the time to write it down fully or play test it. So I present, well, this is what it would probably look like if I did come up with a rule, more or less. And it just becomes a whole bunch of pros discussing what the rule should do and how it looks. Seeing what exists in Xanathar's guide for traps, and seeing what exists in the DM's guide. The DM's guide is that crap. It's them, well, we should probably have a rule for this, and, it would look like this, so we'll write an essay about how the rule would probably like, and some examples of how it would work in play if we bothered to come up with a rule. 3 years later, they bothered to come up with a system.
Yeah.
And so this book makes me mad now. And this is the problem. I kept finding good content.
It's not just that this book makes you mad now. It's that it makes you mad about a book that has already come out.
Yeah. Because this is what the DM's guide should have been filled with. Okay? Some of this stuff should have been in the player's handbook, for God's sake. And quite frankly, if you cut out the other 2/3 of this book, all the spells and class options, and filled it with more of this, I would call this book worth the price tag. As it stands, despite the fact that I am finding useful stuff in the middle of this, it is all stuff that I have already figured out 3 years on how to work around. Okay? So at this point, I don't need it. This book is not worth it. What is it going for? $45, $50?
$50.
$50. Yeah. I don't see this book as worth the price tag. I really don't.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately the problem.
Can I'm with you there that I don't see it as worth the price, but I also want to point out a couple of other things.
Yeah, by all means.
This is a 192-page book, right? Of those 192 pages, 54 of them are nothing but tables. Tables to roll on for all kinds of things. Pages and pages and pages and pages of tables all in a row. 23 of those pages are nothing but spell explanations.
Yes.
I don't consider spell explanations to be high value content, really. I know you need to have spell explanations so you know what the spells do and how to make them work and all that. But it's more of a requirement to have those than it is something that you would include because it's helpful and useful in a broader sense.
Can I? Well, let me try to translate maybe and help you here.
Okay, translate me.
The game doesn't need more spells.
Probably.
There are so many spells in the game that having a whole new 25 pages of spells doesn't change the game one way or the other. It has no impact. There's 25 more pages of spells. It does. It's not a value add because it doesn't. It's just here's more options for the spellcasters who already have so many options.
Right.
So
altogether, you've got 73 pages of not too useful stuff.
Right.
Okay? And we're not prime content stuff. Let's put it that way.
And I noticed that you seem to be referring to the class options as actual useful content there. So
no, hang on.
Okay. I was about to compliment your charitability there.
No,
because
don't.
I will say, okay, class options are fine. Players like them.
Yeah.
I'm not going to.
I've never once found them necessary.
Yeah.
I mean, necessary in terms of this game will not play without these class options.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are other, and I guess there are those who need them, and that's fine.
Well, there are those who
like you were
them.
saying, yeah, like you were saying, there's you can dual class. Hello. We're taking options we have already given you that are much broader and then narrowing them down much further than what you could do yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So basically, once you take out the spells and you take out all the tables that are in there, you've got about 115 pages of what I'm going to charitably call new content.
Right.
The problem I have with the player's options is those tables.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because I understand that the way the game is now set up, you need these tables, all right, by and large.
Right.
All right. They sort of have to maybe be in there. Mm-hmm. Some of them. All right. But they suck. They really, really suck. And I will tell you exactly why they suck. They suck because they don't have anywhere to happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's no place. It's just data,
Yeah.
There's no context for any of it. There's no way to make your character feel like part of the place they're in, mm-hmm. in those tables. And yet that is what those tables are supposed to be doing ostensibly.
Yeah. Are you talking about like the background and life events and
yes,
and
yes.
all of that stuff?
All of
because
that stuff.
There is an extensive system of random tables that will determine basically all of the events of your entire life, including why you became a member of the class you became. And what, major events that shaped your life and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Let me give you, I'm going to compare and contrast a couple of things. All right. Okay. You've got personal decisions, right?
Okay.
Your character's life takes a particular course depending on the choices you make for the character's background and class, blah, blah, blah. All right. That starts on like page 64 in the player options.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got the background things for like childhood home, childhood memories. I guess those are all prior to that, but
mm-hmm.
You've got acolyte and charlatan and criminal and hermit. And each of these things is, I became a blank because, all right. And then you get a very general statement. Like I'm looking at hermit. Okay. Mm-hmm. The hermit says, I became a hermit because, and then you roll a D6. And your options are, my enemies ruined my reputation and I fled to the wilds to avoid further disparagement.
Mm-hmm.
I am comfortable with being isolated as I seek inner peace. I never liked the people I called my friends, so it was easy for me to strike out on my own. I felt compelled to forsake my past, but did so with great reluctance, and sometimes I regret making that decision. I lost everything, my home, my family, my friends. Going it alone was all I could do. Society's decadence disgusted me, so I decided to leave it behind. Those are your 6 options for I became a hermit because. All right? Where does any of that happen? I understand you write your background based on this kind of stuff afterwards, right?
Right.
And you fill in the details particular to your campaign.
Right. Yeah. This is basically, these little things are meant to be inspirations, and then you fill it in with details.
Mm-hmm. But this tells me, essentially, that every setting for D&D, whether that's Forgotten Realms, whether that's, gosh, help me out here, Dark Sun?
Sure.
Whether that's Greyhawk?
Well, right now there is only one setting for D&D.
I understand that. But there isn't, because nobody's playing that setting necessarily.
Right.
Everybody's
the only
playing
thing we have is the generic.
Right. People are playing in Eberron. People are, their home campaigns for whatever worlds they've got, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This tells me that this system here, the way it's used, the way it's presented, that all those worlds are generic.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing unique about them in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like that. I mean, I'm not saying they have to like name and date all of this, right?
Yeah.
Because that would just as easily disenfranchise people. Okay?
Right.
But I want some flavor in here somewhere. Something that makes me feel like I'm from an actual place.
Mm-hmm.
Where actual things actually happen, and not just I've rolled on a table and these are the answers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a prime example of how this is done well.
Okay.
And this comes from a company we've talked about quite a bit on this show.
Okay.
This comes from Kenzer and Company, home of Hackmaster, etc.
Right.
And it is the Kingdoms of Calamar Players Primer, which came out for their own setting, Kingdoms of Calamar, for 3.0, 3.5, stuff like that. I don't remember what year this is actually published in. I guess I could look. 2004, I guess it is. Okay? Inside here, this is a player's primer. This is all about the Calamar setting, everything a player could reasonably be expected to know. All right, cities and governments and all that kind of stuff. It's very detailed, frankly. Mm-hmm. And helps you kind of ground your characters and your players in the kingdoms of Calamar. All right. Mm-hmm. I'm looking right here at a table for let's see, barbarian training. This is in their selection of quick roll backgrounds. You roll a 10-sider. You have 10 of different events that could be part of your barbarian training. A true master of the wild who hails from a fierce tribe from the far north trained you. Mm-hmm. During your training, you became rivals with another apprentice and were always trying to see who was the best hunter. Your master used to call you by the name of some timid creatures. You once encountered a vicious creature in the wild and managed to kill it. Turns out it was a kobold. Mm-hmm. Whether by luck or skill, you gained a reputation as a good tracker. You were once told that you show promise. An inept hunter accidentally shot you in the leg with an arrow during your training. And I'll leave the rest of them out because I don't need to read the entire list for you. But those to me, even though they say nothing about Calamar, they provide enough detail that you feel like it's something that actually happened to you in the world.
Right.
Okay? Without binding you down to a particular milieu, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
is the word I want.
You know what? Like, listening to that, I'm going to, like, there are some entries on this table, on these various tables, that that do the same thing. There are a few, okay? And I promise I'm building to a point. Like, under Sailor, I was press ganged by pirates and forced to serve on their ship until I finally escaped. That is, again, one of those events like that it at least makes you feel like you're centered in the world. Right? There's an external force that came from outside of your character in the world and did this to you. And that's fine. And there are a few of them. The problem is there are also on the same tables, like I'm trying to find one that makes my one of my relatives was a sailor who took me to sea, and that's how I became a sailor. Like, well, I was born to be a sailor. And that is so generic and empty and devoid of any interesting story at all. Okay, I like there, being press ganged by pirates and forced to sail on their ship and forced to serve on their ship. You were not a sailor by will, you were enslaved by pirates. That is something that speaks to your character. Like, that's going to affect your character. At least you can see how that will change your character. But one of my relatives was a sailor, and now I'm a sailor. That is like a non-answer. Like, why did you become a sailor? One of my favorite answers for the rogue was, I've always been nimble and quick of wit, so I decided to use those talents to help me make my way in the world. That's why I became a rogue. I became a rogue because I figured I was good at being a rogue. Well, that's boring. And 3 of the answers, I can find 4 of the answers on the rogue table that are essentially, well, I'm going to be a rogue because I'll probably be good at it. I decided to turn my natural lucky streak into the basis of career. Though I still realize that improving my skills is essential. So, and again, that's the same thing. I'm a rogue because I'm a rogue.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with these tables, is that they're so unevenly done. That, there are a few inspiring gems in them. Like some of the supernatural events, like I like this one. Okay, under supernatural events that might have happened in your life, you witnessed a falling red star, a face appearing in the frost, or an omen that, or something you're certain is an omen. Okay, that's cool. I realize that there's 3 different omens to pick from there, but at least there's something. The next entry or 2 entries down was, you witnessed a minor miracle.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's like, how is that not the same thing as what I just read, only less detailed? You felt the presence of a deity in a holy site. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Like, they are so vapid. And then what kills me is, like, the number of this stuff. Now, realizing this is all optional. No player has to do this. This is player masturbation. This is, I'm writing the giant backstory, and I like to have hundreds of details in my backstory. Because there are so many tables to roll on, and like even an adult will have like 6 different life events of that nature, and there's a thing that caused you to become your class, and a thing that caused you to become your background, which some of those can be interestingly contradictory. Which, and where you grew up. The other thing too is that, like, some of the other stuff, like as a rogue, you grew up on the street or whatever, you were making your way, but then you roll your childhood home, and it's like you grew up in a mansion and you had like a huge family and yada yada yada.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so obviously you have to do a little bit of editing, but this is all just like, this is for the player to just sit down and play with because they want to write 3 pages of backstory and they need some inspiration. So
Right.
Fine and dandy. What bothers me about it is that in all of these piles of details, what I would much rather have is stuff that I know as a GM I can make use of. Like, what I would really like is somewhere in this whole pile of random garbage you can roll on is what motivates you. You know, are you in this for the money? Are you in it because you're motivated by the greater good? Alternity. This is going back a long way. Last role-playing game TSR ever published. Okay? Alternity, when you designed your character, and I'm leafing through it here, you picked a series of attributes, right? And one of them was motivation, right? This was why you were, in a very general sense, what it was that pushed you to adventure. Okay? And the list, there's like, 10, 12 different things. And they're very simple things. It's like, I'm looking for a deeper meaning in the world. I'm looking for meaning. I'm in it for discovery. I want to find the truth. I'm in it to have fun. I'm in it to help others. I'm at a loose end. Basically, like the character's just flapping around out there and just taking on whatever's there. I'm trying to gain personal power. I'm in it for my own survival. I have trust that there's destiny or fate driving things. I want to win. I want to be the best, and I want to improve myself. Having the players answer a question like that in a very general way would be infinitely more useful to me as a GM than knowing that they became a sailor because they had a relative who was a sailor. Why did you keep sailing? Why do you sail toward the horizon? That's what I want to know. There's a thing, in Alternity, it also had a thing on moral attitude, and it discussed a bunch of different moral attitudes. It wasn't merely a alignment thing, but it was a bunch of different ways that you would make moral decisions in the world, like anti-authority, or ethical, or honorable, or selfish, or conformist, or virtuous, or unscrupulous, or worldly, or pragmatic. Those are all useful descriptions of how your character will make decisions. And again, that to me as a GM, that would be golden information. That's the stuff I would love to get out of a backstory. And I would love to take all of these pages out of here and instead write up, say, 5 questions that players should answer for their background.
Yeah.
Things like that. Things like, what is your motivation? What is your immediate goal? Because motivation is different from goal, right? Your motivation, your immediate goal might be to get rich. I'm looking to gain money. Your motivation might be, or your motivation might be you want to get rich. I'm just having trouble here. But you know what I'm saying? There's a difference between a motivation and a goal, and I would really like to know both. I don't, and these randomly, sometimes interesting and mostly not interesting, vapid, empty, useless details don't give me much of anything. And I know there are people out there who will look at it right now, when a character had this supernatural event and they witnessed an omen, and as a GM, now you can write that into the story. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what? All that does is tell me that sometime down the road, I have to have an adventure that resolves the omen. What I want to know is, when I'm writing every adventure, how am I going to draw that character in? Like, D&D doesn't think about how this stuff is going to be used. The same with the personality traits and the ideals and the flaws and all that other crap and their useless inspiration system. It's all just vestigial. It's flapping around on there because they think it's a good idea to let players pick this stuff because they think that's what makes role-playing. But none of it serves any useful purpose. And you know what? I'm going to jump in here in defense of random tables too.
Oh, okay, good. Play both sides.
Yeah, well, no, here's the thing with the random tables is that with a question like, what is your ideal or what is your motivation? Okay, a random table serves a couple of purposes. First of all, for people who don't want to be bothered answering the question, it lets them roll. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But for the people who do want to try and answer the question, the random table becomes a list of examples of what their answer should look like. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, okay, when you say ideal, this is what you mean. So if I think about my character in this way, I can come up with one. So there is some value in these little random tables.
Yeah.
It's still not worth the, what did you say, 73 pages of random tables?
70. Well, it's 54 pages of tables between both the player's options and the DM section.
Yeah. So I'm not gonna defend that. I think that's terrible. But I will argue that there is some use for some random tables. Speaking of random tables, by the way, if you, unless you have anything to add about that topic.
No, I've calmed down now.
Okay. All right. Now I'm going to get riled up again.
Okay.
There are 2 sets of random tables in this book, Xanathar's Guide, that again should have been there all along. One of them is they took the encounter tables. Basically, if you're in the woods, you'll encounter,
Right.
You might encounter this monster or that monster. The ones from the DM's Guide, these encounter tables that they give us in Xanathar's Guide are actually broken down by levels. Okay? So you have a table of encounters that you might run into in a forest, if the forest or the characters or whatever are between levels 1 and 4. Which is infinitely more useful than the monsters by environment list. There's a couple of random encounter tables given in the monster manual that are just, here's a bunch of monsters. And they don't care about the levels at all. And it's like, again, why isn't this in there? Why isn't this in my monster manual? It's all the same terrain types that are already covered in the DM's Guide. It's the same terrain types they cover in the DM's Guide, and yet they actually break down encounter numbers and by level and say, here, these are reasonable encounters for this area, instead of just saying, well, this is a monster you would see there, and also this level 20 monster. So, and I should also mention that they did rewrite their encounter building system in an attempt to simplify it. And they did, there's 2 ways you can use it. I genuinely cannot quite figure out what they're driving at with these. They have a bunch of tables that show ratios of character level to challenge rating, to number of monsters, whatever. I have no idea what they're really driving at there. But they do have quick matchup tables, which basically says, if you have a first level character, no, this doesn't work. I might be lying. This table gives you a way to match characters of a certain level. For instance, looking at the third, you see that a CR half monster is equivalent to 1/3 level character. See, even they're making you jump through so many hoops to convert it. That table is not what I thought it was. I really thought it was a way to just look at the table and say, oh, 4th level party, I need 3 monsters of challenge rating a half. But that's not what it is. So fine. So they rewrote their encounter building stuff. It's not any simpler. So I take that back. And the one other set of random tables, or the one other set of tables that I really, really like, are the magic item tables, where they list all of the magic items by type, by rarity, by whether they are minor, major, or super major. I can't remember what the classifications are. Minor or major, common, rare, common, uncommon, rare, very rare, legendary, and whether or not they need attunement, and if there's any limitations on the attunement. The point of all of this is if I'm creating a first level adventure and I want to put magic items in there, I know that I'm going to be putting minor items of common rarity. Now there's a table with just those items where I can look down and see Heward's Handy Spice Pouch. That seems fun. Hat of Wizardry. That would be cool, but there's no wizards in my party. I'm not going to put that in there. You know? That's incredibly useful. That belongs with the magic items in the list of magic items that is in my Dungeon Master's Guide. But then again, this is also the group of people who did not think that their monster manual needed an index by anything other than alphabetical. Oh, one other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this also speaks to my whole, why isn't this stuff in the core books? Weren't we supposed to get a whole bunch of like optional rules and stuff? Like, weren't they gonna, I don't know. I thought they promised new ways for the DM to run the game, new modes of play, that kind of a thing. This is all just clarification of stuff that already exists.
Yeah.
You know?
But the whole book is optional, sir.
Well, yeah, except it really isn't. The whole book, half the book just improves the tools that I was given, that, the broken tools they gave me.
I have a final question for you about this book, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Because I guess we've pretty much talked it to death, huh?
Page 89. Page
89. Going there now.
The art overall in the book is pretty standard 5th edition art. It's all of it's pretty reasonable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reasonable or better.
Yeah, no, I'll say I actually like the art style of 5th edition, and it looks very consistent.
Yes. Until you get to page 89.
Okay, I did not notice that.
Why is there an accountant? Not a a medieval fantasyland accountant. A just walked out of Wall Street accountant. Briefcase, glasses,
suit. Yeah, so to set the scene for those of you who don't own the book and can't see it or don't want to be bothered, it's a half page piece of art that depicts some sort, it looks like a fiendish wizard holding a minion recruitment. Basically, he's got a little tent set up and he's looking over a resume and he's considering all of these people for minions. And over on the right, we see, like an orc barbarian who has clearly been rejected and is sobbing as he is walking out of frame. And standing there online, there is a mind flayer or illithid, if you prefer, arms crossed and defiantly staring at this wizard as he reviews his resume. And at the back of the line, there is a massive ogre towering over the rest of the line with a crumpled paper in his hand. And then online, between them, is a timid-looking young man who looks like he just graduated, in a business suit with glasses, hugging a briefcase to himself and looking in fear at the ogre behind him as if he has suddenly realized he is in the wrong line.
Yeah.
That's... now, I'm going to say that's hilarious, but not in the way they want me to think it's funny.
No. You've also missed a very important final element in this picture, sir.
What's that?
At the very back of the portion of the line we can see is a gelatinous cube.
Oh my god, I didn't even notice the gelatinous cube there.
That has apparently engulfed whoever was in line in front of him.
And I like the body's last, like, from the expression on the skull, because there's a dissolved person inside that gelatinous cube. He is reaching out in, like, he's obviously this is his, after he died. He died reaching not for the sword that is floating in the cube next to him. He's reaching for his resume.
Yeah.
That is what he was protecting with his life.
Yep.
Wah, wah. But then you know what? That's the whole theme of this book is wah, wah. Is there a supplement that sticks out in your mind that did things totally right, or that changed the way you were going to run a game, or created some new possibilities for you, or anything like that? What's a supplement that you bought, that you got home, and you genuinely were happy reading it?
Yes, but it's not just one supplement.
Okay.
I don't know what it is about this company that gets them brought up in the category of good stuff so often.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going once again to Kenzer and Company, and I'm going to tell you about Goods and Gear, the Ultimate Adventurer's Guide.
Okay. Ooh, that actually sounds like a really good one.
Trove of Treasure Maps. I love Goods and Gear, the Ultimate Adventurer's Guide, because it is illustrative of the things it's talking about. In fact, it has an absolutely wonderful picture in one section of it, in which somebody has killed a dragon using at least one example of every weapon in the book.
Really?
And they're all still stuck in the dragon. And that's brilliant, I think. But it goes beyond even just the weapons and stuff. And believe me, there's a ton of weapons in there. And there are cultural weapons from a variety of different cultures. And so you have just this huge variety of things to choose from weapon-wise.
Mm-hmm.
Even though some of them are numerically the same, visually they're distinct and unique and interesting. But it also goes into neat little things like trading gear and how it's used and stuff like that. But my absolute favorite part of Goods and Gear, though, is where it gets down to talking about money.
Okay.
And the different coinages that are available or could be available, and how influxes of large amounts of money into a region can affect the economy. And it also talks about things like some places won't take coin from other places, and what do you have to do in exchanging and things like that. Okay. It's just this really great hardback supplement that in about 100 pages or so goes into a lot of fine detail on things you can do. And I'm telling you, every bit of information in this book you can either hang story on or enhance the story you've got.
Very cool.
Okay, and I love that in a book. The other one, Trove of Treasure Maps, also by Kenzer and Company, is brilliant because it is exactly what it says on the cover. It is a variety booklet of treasure maps. I think, I don't remember exactly how many are in there. I want to say there are at least 10. It's a pretty small book, page count wise, but there's at least 10 in there. But each of the maps is not just, I mean, I know what you're thinking. You think, oh, there's a bunch of maps in a book. Big deal, right? No. These are treasure maps, sir. Treasure maps. Think about a treasure map. Think about the map, Thorin's map in The Hobbit. Okay, what was on that map?
Well, there was instruction. Well, there was a riddle, actually, that if you found it would reveal a secret side entrance to I guess what was essentially a dungeon. Yeah.
It told a story.
Yes.
On that map.
Oh, yeah.
Not just the moon letters, but all the other stuff on the map as well told a story about that location, about the people who made the map and that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every one of these treasure maps in Trove of Treasure Maps is like that. They all tell a story about what's going on the map. And they do it with the stuff not like there's a paragraph underneath the map, blah, 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 blah. Although I think some of that is there just to give you context and tell you what's going on. But the map itself, if you hand one to your players, they have something interesting and exciting to look at and read and try to make sense of.
And you, at the same time, as the GM, you have something to build an adventure around.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There was actually a product like that for AD&D 2nd edition.
Was there?
Yeah, it was called Maps of Mystery, I think. And it was actually loose pages of, the full color maps. Exactly what you're describing is they were not all treasure maps. There were some treasure maps in there. There were some maps where you had two copies, a map that revealed the secrets and a map that did not. So one that was for the players and one was for the GMs. But it was just the same thing. It was just a collection of maps that told you the beginning of a story or that suggested a story. And, you could hand to your players, or some of them were meant just for the GM to work with, where the GM would create an adventure around that map and do the things. I think it was called Maps of Mystery. And that was, I honestly want to say that was what led to eventually there was a supplement, not a supplement, a regular feature in Dungeon Magazine where they would just present a map with nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and that was that.
There's also a third book in a similar vein to the map one, but I'm having trouble running it down because it doesn't appear to be on their website. But it was kind of the same thing, but for towns and cities.
Mm-hmm.
A number of maps for locations, except I think these were specific to the Kingdoms of Kalamar setting.
Mm-hmm.
But that does not mean they can't be ripped out and the names erased.
Oh, absolutely.
In
some case, you don't even have to erase the names.
No. Your players haven't been everywhere yet. They don't know what's where.
Yeah, exactly. See, I love those sorts of products.
Yeah, give me something that helps me tell a better story. That's what I want.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want something that just lays there like a dead fish.
And I also, by the same token, I don't go in for something that has finished the story for me.
No.
Like as a GM, I'm a creator. I like to create my content, but it's really nice to have something like that to hang a creation off of. I would love to. I'm very interested in that treasure map thing.
Mm-hmm.
That would be neat.
I will link to it.
Yeah, please. I really wish I could remember the name of the. I think it was Maps of Mystery, but my search foo is not turning it up.
As I seem to remember, there was a Greyhawk product that came out 3035 somewhere in there that was kind of similar as well. Do you have a favorite supplemental product that really made you go wow?
Yeah, but mine's actually really, like, compared to yours. I now I feel a little embarrassed about mine. I mean, there's a couple that really did stand out. Like, for Alternity, since I was thinking about that, I absolutely love Bruce Cordell's Tangents, which was dimensional travel. So if you wanted to run a Sliders campaign, and it was just a book of, apart from talking about the rules for traveling between alternate Earths, Earths that had alternate histories to ours. The most interesting thing about it was just these little random these little random tables of where the divergent history happened. So, you would roll on a table and it would be like, like the divergent history happened in the ancient times, and it was that the Egyptian Empire never weakened and collapsed. It ruled, So ultimately, instead of everything be in the West being influenced by Greco-Roman civilization, it was influenced by Egyptian civilizations and stuff like that.
Oh,
Yeah, so that was just a really neat book of possibilities of generating alternate history worlds for the characters to explore. But I've got to say, the one that I've gotten the most use out of, the one that I go back to time and again to this day, is a book called Cityscape. It was published for D&D 3rd edition, and I've talked about it before. You might have heard me talk about it on Twitter if you follow me there. It's by Ari Marmel, and I gotta look now. I'm pulling it down off the shelf. Here we go. And C.A. Suleiman. I don't know who that is. I know who Ari Marmel is. But the vast majority of the book is just a breakdown of building cities by neighborhood. So the assumption is that instead of like the crazy demographic rules of 3rd edition, you could lay out a city by saying, okay, here's the marketplace district and here's residences and whatever. But what was very interesting is that for each neighborhood, and there were fantastic, or there were fantasy neighborhoods too. But for each neighborhood, it would give you the sort of buildings that you would expect to find there. It would give you a description so that when the players were passing through this part of town or having an adventure there, you had a sense of what it looked like and what it sounded like and what it smelled. So if they're in the Garrison District, which is the neighborhood that builds up around like a guard post or a fortress or whatever, the description, the sounds of barked orders, marching boots, clacking hooves, and clanging metal dominate this neighborhood. This is the home and the practice ground of the city's watch, its soldiers, or both. Most of the buildings here are traditional in style, built of stone, with narrow windows, flat roofs, and crenellations. Patrols move in and out of the garrison on a regular basis, usually during shift changes. Okay. And then each neighborhood also gives you a plot hook. Something that you could build a story around in that neighborhood. So you can build an entire, campaign around this stuff. And then there's you had a halfling neighborhood. Halfling districts somehow never seem permanent, even when the structures are of wood and stone. Bright decorations change frequently, and roads are full of ponies, riding dogs, and small carts at all times. Much space is devoted to greenery, yards, and vegetable gardens. Windows are large and unglazed. Many of the residents' house multiple families with separate bed chambers around common rooms. So there's just this whole that's as you're walking through the halfling neighborhood, that's what it's like. And there's other stuff in there too. There's stuff about building factions and power structures and running intrigue campaigns. And there's a bunch of NPCs. So it really is just a source book that is thematically tied together for when your adventure is in a city.
nice.
Most importantly, though, and I don't know if this is still available, but at that time, Wizards of the Coast was, for each book that they published, they would also publish what they called a web enhancement, where after you bought the book, you could go online to Wizards of the Coast website and download a PDF that was usually around 5 pages of supplemental material that enhanced whatever you got in that book. And the one for Cityscape included a bunch of more neighborhoods that were more fantastic. I realize the grammar there, in a bunch of more neighborhoods, but there you go. It was a bunch of more neighborhoods so that you could build even more fantastic cities. It was great. And like I said, because I love designing cities and drawing maps. People have probably seen some of my city mapping projects. And I just keep going back to it. It's a rich well.
Well, I'm sure we could talk for another hour or two at least, but we are, in fact, out of time.